Hi guys, this is Kumar. We are discussing macromolecules. So in our last video, we have discussed what are macromolecules and what are the different types of macromolecules. So macromolecules, also known as polymers, which are made from the small units called as monomers. And there are four types. One, it's carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acid, and lipids. So in the last video, we have discussed about the carbohydrates. Now let's look at the other macromolecules. One is lipids. So what are lipids? Lipids are the general term for compounds which are not soluble in water. And they are only soluble in hydrophobic solvents. And here is the thing to remember. Lipids in our body are used to store the most of our energy, which is required for various metabolic activities in our body. And the examples for lipids are fats, phospholipids, oils, waxes, steroids, and hormones. So as you know, the fat is not at all bad. It is actually required for numerous functions in your body related to growth and reproduction. And the last one is the triglycerides. So there are 6 functions of lipids. One, they store energy and it's long term. And they have a protection against the heat loss. So they are kind of insulators or provide insulation in the temperature change. Third is the protection against the physical shock. So they are kind of cushion for all those internal body parts as a physical cushion. They have also protection against water loss, so they minimize the evaporation from the body or any living organism. They also act as chemical messengers, that are the hormones, which are responsible for the various activity like in the cell. And they're also the major component of the membranes in the cell, like the various cellular parts are made up of phospholipids. So the lipids, which are the triglycerides, are composed of 1 glycerol and 3 fatty acids. So if you look at this structure, which is a glycerol, and it's attached with the fatty acid. So there are 3 chains of fatty acids which are attached to the glycerol, and they make a triglyceride. So why we say triglyceride? Because there are the 3 chains of fatty acids which are attached to the glycerol. So there are 2 kinds of fatty acid, and you can find those on the food labels. One is saturated fatty acids, which no double bonds, and if you look at the structure, they are straight. And unsaturated fatty acids, which are double bond. So when you look at the labels of the food, you will see the saturated fats or the fatty acids, which are normally solid at the room temperature, and most come from the animal sources such as beef, poultry, whole fat milk, cheese, and butter. However, several come from plant sources like coconut, palm kernel oils, and these saturated fats raise level of both the total blood cholesterol and the low density lipoprotein or the bad cholesterol. Talking about the unsaturated fatty acid, which is primarily from plant foods such as nuts and seeds and are liquid at room temperature. The example for unsaturated fats are vegetable oil such as olive, peanut, safflower, sunflower, soybean, and corn. So unlike saturated fats, unsaturated fats do not raise the blood cholesterol or low density lipoprotein. So that's why they are considered as good. And saturated fatty acids, why they are considered as bad? Because they raise the bad cholesterol. Proteins. Proteins are also polypeptides. That means they are the chains of peptide, and The smaller monomers for proteins are amino acids. So there are 20 different kinds of amino acids bonded together by a peptide bonds, and that's why they are called as polypeptides. There are 6 functions of proteins. 1. They help in storage. Like in the egg, albumin, they are storing the proteins. Transport, that is hemoglobin, which is a protein which helps in the transportation of oxygen in your body. Regulatory, the hormones are the various regulatory substances which act in the various metabolic activities in the cell. Movement, they help in the movement, and the muscle are one of the examples for proteins. Structural, they are some of the structural parts of your body like membranes, hair, nails. And enzymes. So enzymes are the substances which help in the chemical reactions and the cellular reactions. There are 4 levels of protein structure. One is primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure, and quaternary structure. So based upon their structure, the amino acids are bonded together by peptide bonds. That is, in primary structure, it's a straight chain. So if you look at this is 1 amino acid, this is 2, this is 3, and they are joined with each other with the peptide bonds. Secondary structure. This is a 3-dimensional folding arrangement of the primary structure. So if you fold the primary structure into coils and pleats, it makes a secondary structure, and they're joined together by the hydrogen bonds. So if you can, there are 2 examples for secondary structure. One is alpha helix and one is beta pleated sheet. So the alpha helix is in a kind of coil shaped, and the beta pleated are zigzag. And they both are, all these structures are joined by the hydrogen bonds. Tertiary structure, it's another form when the secondary structure is bent and folded into more complex 3D arrangement, and they are linked together with a hydrogen bond and ionic and disulfide bridges. So they have subunits. So you can see here there's one subunit with the alpha helix structure, and there is zigzag beta pleated sheets. So they're all together, they make a tertiary structure. So if you can see, there are 2 secondary structures here we have highlighted. So when you fold or bend the secondary structure, they will make a tertiary structure. Quaternary structure, basically it's a composed of 2 or more subunits of all those structures. So if you look at the structure of these, there are subunits. So these are one tertiary substructure or subunit. This is another tertiary subunit. So when you put them together, they make a quaternary structure. So why it's called as quaternary? You can see there are 4 structure or the subunits joined together. They are kind of globular in shape, form in an aqueous environment, and the enzymes are, an example is the enzymes, and which is a hemoglobin. Nucleic acid. It's one of the most important part of your body. And nucleic acids are the biopolymers, or the large biomolecule essential to all known forms of life. And there are 2 types. One is deoxyribonucleic acid, which is called as DNA, and its shape is double helix. Another one is ribonucleic acid, which is RNA, and it's in a single strand. So nucleic acids are composed of long chains of nucleotides, and they are made up of 3 components, which is 5 carbon sugar, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base. We are going to discuss that more in detail. And these all are linked by the dehydration synthesis. So nucleotide includes, as we have discussed, phosphate group, pentose sugar, which is a 5-carbon, nitrogenous bases. There are 4 types, which is adenine, which is represented by A, thymine with T, which is only found in DNA, and uracil, which is only found in RNA, and cytosine is C, and guanine G. So in DNA, there are 4 nitrogenous bases: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. And in RNA, it's adenine, uracil, cytosine, and guanine. So if you look more in detail for this structure of nucleotide, there are phosphate group, which is joined here, and a sugar, which is a deoxyribose, which is present in DNA, and a nitrogenous base. So looking at the DNA structure, it's a kind of double helix. Why we call that as a double helix? Because there are 2 strands of ribose, deoxyribose sugar, which are joined together with phosphate, and one in the middle that is guanine or cytosine. These are the in the middle, the sugar phosphates, which are joined together. And if you look at the pattern, the guanine pairs with cytosine and thymine pairs with adenosine. So these are the pattern which you find in DNA. So strings of nucleotides are bonded to form helical backbones, typically 2 for DNA, but there's 1 for RNA, and assemble into chains of base pairs. So in the middle, the guanine is pairing with cytosine and thymine is pairing with adenosine. So we will be discussing the structure of nucleic acid more in detail, but these are the 4 macromolecules which you should know before we start the various functions of the cell.